Hi, pre-algebra class. Today we are going to be working on sections 2.4 and 2.5. They're fairly similar, so we're going to put them together and learn them all at one time. So if you'll get your iNotebooks out, you need to take some notes. You're going to write down what I'm writing down. So we are looking at lesson 2.4 and 2.5. This is going to be over multiplying and dividing integers. So the first thing you need to know is that the rules here are a little bit different than the adding and subtracting. We've been using the chips for adding and subtracting. That doesn't work with multiplication and division. So we have to really put a kind of a line in our mind that addition and subtraction have a completely different set of rules than multiplication and division. So there's a couple of different ways that I like to show kids, and then you can choose which one you like better. So the first one is the triangle method. Where you draw a triangle with 1 plus and 2 minuses on the bottom. So this one's pretty easy to use. You just, whenever you have your problem, so let's say we're doing -4 times -3. So we have two negatives. We're multiplying a negative times a negative. We're going to cross out what we have. So negative and negative, we're crossing out two negatives, and whatever you can still see is what your answer is going to end up being. So 4 times 3 is just 12, and because we have a negative and a negative, the positive is left over, so therefore the answer is a positive 12. Now I know this is really different than adding and subtracting. Adding and subtracting, we would have negatives and negatives, so we'd have a negative for an answer. It doesn't work with multiplication. Multiplication is completely different. Here's the other way. Well, actually, let's do a division first. So if I have, say, -15 divided by 3, notice that I'm not showing it with the division sign, right? We're using mature math. So I have one negative, and the 3 is a positive because it doesn't have a sign. So we're going to cover up a positive and a negative, and what we see is left is what our answer is going to be. So we have a negative answer here. 15 divided by 3 is 5. We know that a negative divided by a positive, our answer is going to be negative. So it's -5. So you can do it that way, or here's another way that you might like it better. This one is a Tic-Tac-Toe Board. And you have to remember that the positives always win diagonally, and that the positives always win across the top. Then from there, you're just going to fill in the rest with negatives. Okay, so here's how to read this. So from the top, you have a positive times or divided by a positive is going to equal a positive. So this would be like 3 times 5. Of course, that's going to equal 15. We know that, right? Positive times a positive is always a positive. Positive divided by a negative is always a positive. I'm sorry, positive divided by a positive is always a positive. Like 20 divided by 4. We know that that's automatically going to be a positive. We don't have to worry about it if there's no signs at all. It's just regular multiplication and division. The second one, though, a negative times a positive will equal a negative. This one can flip-flop, so you can put a positive here and a negative here. Just as long as you have one positive and one negative, you're always going to have a negative answer. So let's look at some examples here. So if we have a -3 times a positive 9, we know 3 times 9 is 27. We have one positive and one negative right here. So our answer is a negative. Let's look at a division. So if we have 30 divided by 10, let's do negative 10. 30 divided by negative 10. So if we have 30 divided by negative 10, we have a positive divided by a negative. Positive divided by a negative right here is going to give us a negative answer. So we know that 30 divided by 10 is 3. A positive divided by a negative, it has to be a negative. Okay? The last one then, down here on the bottom, is a negative times a negative is always going to give us a positive. So let's say we have negative 8 times negative 2. We know that 8 times 2 is 16. We have a negative times a negative, which is this one down here. Our answer is going to be positive. Now, be really careful with these because I have kids all the time look at this and say, oh, well, that looks like negative 8 minus 2. It doesn't look like multiplication. So here's what I always tell them. Always look between the number and the parenthesis. If there is nothing between the number and the parenthesis, then it has to be a multiplication. It's kind of like when you squish things together, like AB or like 4X. They're squished together. There's nothing in between them, nothing in between here, so we know automatically it's multiplication. Same goes here. If there's nothing between the parenthesis and the number in front of it, it has to be multiplication. So let's try division really quickly. If we have negative 100 divided by negative 4, we know that 100 divided by 4 is 25. And a negative divided by a negative is automatically a positive. So our answer is a positive 25. Okay, it's your turn to practice. I don't care which way you use, but you need to use one of the two methods that I gave you. So here's the first one. When you're going to do these, I'll put one up on the board. Go ahead and pause the video, work it out, and then start playing the video again, and you can see if your answer was correct. So here's example 1. Example 1 is going to be negative 5 times negative 5. Pause the video. Okay, did you get positive 25? Remember that a negative times a negative is always a positive. Okay, let's try another example. Let's do 16 divided by negative 4. Go ahead and pause the video and work the problem out. Okay, so we know 16 divided by 4 is just 4, and a positive divided by a negative is going to give us a negative answer. Okay, one more. Going to get a little tricky on you this time. So we're going to say negative 4 times 2 times negative 6. Now, we haven't talked about putting 3 of them together, but it's just order of operations. We're just going to go from left to right. So we're going to start right here. And we know that negative 4 times 2, 4 times 2 is 8, a negative times a positive is a negative. Bring down the negative 6. Can you finish the problem now? Go ahead and pause the video, finish the problem, and see if you get my answer. Okay, so did you get positive 48? A negative times a negative has to be a positive. So the correct answer was positive 48. Okay, the last part of this video, the last part of this lesson, is about evaluating expressions. So we know that expression is a problem without an equal sign, right? And evaluating needs to solve. So we're looking at something like this. So if A equals negative 6, and B equals 2, and C equals negative 3, what is A, B, C? Now we know that when they're squished together like this, it automatically is multiplication, right? So when we put the numbers in, we have to be really careful. And now that we're starting to use negatives and positives, this has to happen every time. You have to take the variables out and you have to replace them with parentheses, not the number right off the bat. So I just took out the A, put parentheses, took out the B, put parentheses, took out the C, put parentheses. Now we're going to substitute those numbers in. So we have a -6, positive 2, and a -3. Go ahead and pause the video and work that out and see what you get. Okay, so I know that a -6 times a positive 2 is a -12, and I'm going to bring my -3 down. 12 times 3 I know is 36. A negative times a negative is a positive. So the correct answer is positive 36. So it's just one more step. Be very careful because without the parentheses, this would have looked like this. And that's not at all the right problem. We're not subtracting 62 with -3. This is a multiplication problem. So do you see the difference in how it could look? Okay. So pre-algebra, that's all there is to it. I think you've got this. If you need to rewind the video or rewatch it again, go right ahead. I hope you took notes. I hope you did the examples because now you're getting ready to do some practice problems on your homework. So I will see you guys tomorrow.